Welcome back to another video. So today we're going to tackle the third Black Opal Direct beginner parcel piece. It's not overly exciting, there's not much really to say about it. It's got a little bit of a grey base potch underneath it. There's a little hint of a bit of blue purple in there. Can't tell if it's flashing or anything like that. This is dry now, and it's just one of those classic white top opals. We do have a little bit of water here, so we'll just give it a quick wet, and yeah, it's not a lot. Not a lot to it. So today though, because we've done the whetstones, we've done the sandpaper, they're the real beginner's way of tackling it. Today we're going to go at it with the Rotary Tool. So this is how I do my standard work. So basically this is a flex shaft attached to my Rotary Tool, and the basic plan, just like the whetstones, is to go around the outside and clean it up just to make sure you know what you're looking at. But in this case, we know that we're not going to leave this as the base of the stone, so that white is going to come off. So basically, buzz around the outer edge, buzz off the top, have a look at the surface, and reassess from there. It's a constant game of reassessing, so yeah, we'll do that quickly. I'll record it, I might speed it up, I might cut it out, we'll see. To start with, we'll be using just a coarse diamond bit. It's a cylindrical shape. And get ourselves a little tub of water. This isn't the camera I'd normally record with, but we'll see how it actually goes. So you can see we've tidied up the edges, and you can see now where the colour bar is actually more defined. So it is fairly uneven, but that doesn't matter because we're doing a Rotary Tool job on this one. So it does dip in a little bit in the middle there. But overall it's fairly flat. So I reckon this one will work out quite well. The potch, you can see, is not nicely spread across the entire base. It's more localized just here, so we may have a problem there, in which case we might just have to bring this outer edge down a bit. There is a bit of sand that goes in through there anyway, so that all might have to come off. So we might lose that little bit there, in which case we'll still be left with a fairly nice stone. We're only losing, I don't know, what's that, quarter of the stone? If that sand goes in through there and dodges that up, then we've got this nice potch on the back here, which will just take the point off the end of it and just give it a nice base. But yeah, we'll take off the top and see what's underneath. that's the sides, whoops, bumped camera, that's the sides cleaned up and the top cleaned up. So now we can have a look at it. There's still a few sand spots, but once you get down to this opal layer, you can't really use these ultra coarse bits anymore, because that bit, you can see it here, that level of grit is like using that 80 grit whetstone, 80 grit sandpaper for too long. You can run the risk of starting to get some chips and stuff coming out of the edges when you're trying to tidy up. So even though there are still some sand spots there, we'll be getting those out with a finer grit drill bit. And then we'll also be shaping the stone with the finer grit as well, just because I've found that those really strong grits, really coarse grits, will chip away at this type of opal. It goes pretty well with boulder opal, but with any other type of opal, it's better just to drop back in the grits. It only slows you down a little bit anyway, so it's not a huge deal. And yeah, you can see that the potch here isn't covering this end. So you're starting to see straight through it there where my fingernail's touching. It's a little bit crystally. Yeah, if I do that, you can see it even better. You can see the table a little bit behind it. And that's just because that's got no backing at all. So that's forming a bit of a window. And there's not a lot of color play in this piece at all. So I'm not overly worried or saddened by it. It'll most likely, that part there will get cut out and we'll be left with whatever's on top of this potch here. So it's not going to be an amazing stone, very little color play, but that's what you get sometimes. Now I've purposely recorded this differently to how I'll be recording other carving videos with the rotary tool, just because I wanted to demonstrate one issue with just having a little tub of water and you just grinding away, and that is this thing does make a mess. So if you look at my sleeve here, that's all that rough that we're taking off the top of the opal. It's flicked everywhere. It's on my pants. You can see it here all over the lamp, directly ahead, more of the benches, everything off to the side, scales. I was hoping it wouldn't make this much of a mess. There's a pouch of rough covered in it. There's speckles everywhere. Way off to the side, we've got my other lamp. It just makes an absolute mess. So the way I counter that is I enclose the entire unit with a plastic case. This kind of helps me, well, it gets me to avoid having to mop up this kind of mess, which you just can't help. So what I've got is this, which acts basically as a shield. And so I have the water inside here and I put the camera on top here, just facing straight down. And that's just a action cam GoPro Hero 5, because I don't have the money to be forking out on the best and newest stuff. But yeah, it basically shoots directly down from there. And that prevents all of this mess that's just everywhere now. So that's one thing that people should probably keep in mind when if they decide to go this pathway of carving opal. But yeah, so we're going to drop down in grits. I'm going to actually go to starting to use this shield so the camera will change, and yeah, I'll be back in a minute. So this is the normal setup that I'll be using when I'm dealing with these opals. So I've got plastic cover, the tub of water, and well, you can hardly see the opal, but it's in there. The solution's got a bit cloudy after that last grinding of the top. One thing I didn't mention is that when you are doing a rotary tool kind of method, make sure to keep moving, or at least keeping the stone cool underwater, because the friction will heat up and that'll cause a stone to shatter on you. I've only had it happen once, and that was just because I was trying to, and I just held the piece down and I could feel it heating up on my fingers. And once your fingers are getting hot, just cool the thing down, otherwise you are going to risk it. But I had to push through that, and it does take quite a bit of heat, unless there's a fracture or a crack somewhere within the opal, in which case it'll actually happen much quicker, and it might happen on accident. So yeah, switched out. This is a finer grit, but it's still a diamond grit, and we're just going to go through and we're just going to get rid of a few of these different sand spots and maybe tidy up the edges a little bit. Bring that one back. There's a sand spot on the end of it anyway. We'll have a bit of a play with these sand spots here in the side. Unfortunately I can't zoom with this camera being a GoPro, but hopefully it comes up in the video well enough. Yeah, there's a few pretty deep sand spots everywhere actually. I don't have high hopes for this rock, but I don't know. There's only one way to find out with opal, and that is to get going. So this is a bit from the Gem Cuts Beginners carving kit. Looks something like this. So it's that second bit in. I'm actually going to go to the first bit, but I am noticing that this is very quickly losing its grit, even without applying any pressure to the rock. So it's really not lasting like I would have hoped for a $15 set of bits. You can see how it's gone shinier there, and then it gets foggy here. That shows that the grit's still fairly thick here, but here it's really gone down to polished steel. So I don't know where they've sourced these bits from, but I'm not overly happy with them, because that is not ideal at all. So we'll go up a grit, start back up. Okay, so all the sand is now, well, most of it, there's some tiny sand spots in the front, some really small sand spots, but there is this really grey, colourless potch just sitting in the middle. It pretty much dominates the entire piece except for an outer ring. So if I cover up all that outside ring that you can see there, that's got some nice blue colour to it, but in the centre the potch seems to have taken over it, so this one isn't going to be as good a gem as I would have liked. There may be a bit more colour beneath that, but it doesn't really look like it. As to the bit, this bit is held up perfectly fine, so this bit hasn't been affected at all. So I don't know what it is about this second grit. They're both from the same kit, the Gem Cuts Beginner. But this one seems to really, it just really has degraded rapidly. And I used even less pressure on that than what I have with the one that I'm currently using now. And there is another grit lower, which I haven't tried yet. But it is quite disappointing that it's degraded so much when this one's been perfectly fine. So yeah, we've got a decision to make here, whether or not to grind further deeper into this grey middle here. There does seem to be a little bit of colour deeper down there, but it's just around that edge and where that potch is, and it just looks like that this area that does have this potch on the back just cuts straight through the entire gem right to the front face. So I don't see any colour here in this bottom section. So I think the plan will be to take off this bottom edge, wear that down a little bit further, and if we've got no colour from there, then that's just a bit unfortunate. We're just going to have this crust of colour around the outer edge. That's the plan. You never know with Opal. You can go from a high to a low to a high, so let's try. Well, we've tried our best, so taking in that edge to see if there's any colour starting to form, any kind of colour bar at all, and unfortunately not. It's just that potch, that backing potch goes all the way through, and then just around the outer edge is just a little bit of blue colour that had me interested. But yeah, with the white cap over the top you don't see any of that, and it's completely shot with just potch except for this little C shape of blue, which yeah is quite unfortunate. So I think we'll cut this one short here. So if we were going to go through the whole process, then I'd be going down these finer grits just to get rid of any last little bits of sand and just shaping that outer edge. I'd still use this bit, the bit that's on at the moment, the coarse one, to just grind back this potch on the base, and just to get rid of all the sand, get rid of the little bits of sand along this blue, which will pretty much get rid of all the blue. It's just going to be a really thin C shape. I don't know if I will have any use for this rock at all now, but yeah, go through those. And then these are just soft tips of varying grits all the way down to really fine. So I just start here, work my way down all of them. Once I'm finished with this one, it should have a bit of a polish on it, but if it's a rock that I actually like, I'll go one step further and I will polish it using cerium oxide on felt. So that's this bit here. You can see that it's still stained with all the cerium oxide from the last polish I've done. So yeah, just cerium oxide on felt, and then just buff those surfaces until you get a nice mirror finish. because even though this looks fairly shiny now, that's just because it's wet. And if I give it a quick dry with a towel I keep handy, just like in the whetstone and sandpaper methods, you see that it just goes all foggy, and I haven't actually dried it very well, so you're getting a bit of a flash. But yeah, it's just that foggy, hazy kind of colour. So yeah, unfortunately you can't win them all, and rock number 3 for this Black Opal's Direct beginner's parcel has bombed on us. Bit of a failure. So yeah, that's just what happens. I mean, this is a beginner's parcel, so he's not giving you premium quality gems here. It's just a bit to practice on, and can't say you didn't get any practice on it. So yeah, that's just how that one ends. Unfortunate, but it is what it is. Yeah, so next video I'll probably do another one. Just gotta rock on. Just to add on at the end of the video, you might have noticed that when I was using the drill, even though it was on and it was underwater, sometimes I'd just touch it with my finger like this. That's mainly just to loosen up some of the potch and stuff that gets stuck to the surface of the grit. If this is spinning and you touch it while it's wet, that grit doesn't actually take away any of your finger. So my finger's still perfectly fine. It's all good. You don't cut yourself or anything like that, even with this kind of coarse grit, even with the coarser diamond bits. That water just kind of softens the blow to your finger, and you can actually just touch it lightly and clean off any gunk that builds up on it. So yeah, thought I'd add that on in case anyone was wondering why I was touching the bit while it was still spinning. So yeah, see you in the next vid.